Dream of the Red Chamber, Chapter 83.
And our focus is on a young woman named Dayu. Now, Dayu is brilliant. She's an aristocrat. But her position is incredibly precarious. She's an orphan. She lives under the care of her grandmother, the family matriarch.
Right.
So while she's surrounded by cousins and maids and all this immense wealth, she is profoundly on edge.
And that context is so crucial for everything that follows. I mean, she is highly sensitive and acutely aware that her survival depends entirely on the goodwill of others.
She has no safety net.
None. Her baseline state is hypervigilance. She is a guest in her own home, and she feels it every single second of the day.
Yeah, and that hypervigilance is about to meet a totally random spark. So Dayu is hanging out in her room with her cousins Tanshin and Qingyun, and suddenly, right outside her window, they hear an old woman screaming at the top of her lungs.
Just shattering the peace.
Literally screaming. She yells, "You good-for-nothing little hussy. What kind of thing are you coming into this garden to cause trouble?"
It's just a completely jarring intrusion of aggression into what is normally this very refined, strictly controlled space.
And Dayu's reaction is instantaneous and catastrophic. She doesn't even peek out the window to see what's going on. She assumes immediately that the insult is a targeted attack on her.
Because of that guest mentality.
Right. Because she's an orphaned guest relying on her grandmother's favor, she feels she has to be cautious with, as the text says, every step in every matter. She screams, "I can't live here anymore." She points a shaking finger out the window, her eyes physically roll back in her head, and she faints.
Wow.
The text actually describes her as having her liver and intestines torn apart. Her maid, Ziwan, is instantly sobbing, rubbing Dayu's chest, just trying to revive her. It is sheer chaos.
It's a very visceral translation, but it perfectly captures the somatic reality of her emotional pain. Her internal organs literally feel like they are rupturing.
Okay, let's unpack this, though, because I have to push back here. Looking at this from a modern perspective, or even just as a casual reader, fainting, eyes rolling back in the head, feeling like her organs are tearing because an old woman yelled at someone outside.
It sounds a bit extreme. It sounds incredibly melodramatic. Like, is she just putting on a performance to get attention from her grandmother? Is this some sort of manipulation tactic?
I mean, it is very easy to dismiss it as melodrama. But if we look at the clinical reality of somatic symptom disorder, we see a totally different story. The text isn't describing a performance, it's describing a complete collapse of the nervous system.
Really?
Yeah. Think of her existence like a submarine operating at crush depth. The pressure of the social hierarchy she lives under is just immense. Every word, every glance has a hidden meaning. So when a tiny incident happens, like a gardener yelling outside a window, it's not just a loud noise.
It's the pressure cracking the hull.
Exactly. To Dayu, it sounds like the ping that indicates the hull of the submarine is about to breach. Her body reacts to a perceived mortal threat, shutting down her consciousness just to protect her from the psychological impact.
Which makes the reality check even more tragic, because her cousin, Tanshin, steps outside to confront this abusive woman, and what does she find? The old woman is actually just a gardener who is scolding her own granddaughter.
Just completely mundane.
Totally mundane. The little girl was just following her around while she was tending to the flowers, and the grandmother lost her temper. That's it. Tanshin scolds the woman for breaking the rules of decorum, tells her to get out, and the woman apologizes and leaves.
The contrast between the blunt reality of the situation and Dayu's internal reaction is just staggering.
It really is. And when you look at that chain of events, think about our imposter syndrome analogy again. You're sitting in your cubicle, you feel like you're one mistake away from being fired, and you hear two managers in the hallway saying, "I can't believe we let this useless person in here. They're ruining everything."
You immediately viscerally assume they mean you.
You're packing your desk in your mind before they finish the sentence. And why? Because your baseline anxiety is so high.
Your brain is already primed for that exact rejection, and what this scene highlights so brilliantly is the stark divide between the unvarnished reality of the working servants and the fragile, overthinking mind of the aristocracy.
The old woman has no idea the damage she just caused.
None at all. She operates in a world of practical, immediate frustrations. Just annoyed with a child stepping on flowers. But Dayu operates in a world of complex, internal symbolism. When those two worlds collide, Dayu's fragile system overloads completely.
And the worst part is, knowing it was a misunderstanding doesn't fix anything. Tanshin comes back inside and explains it, like, look, she was just yelling at her granddaughter. These people don't know anything about tact.
But the damage is done.
Right, it doesn't matter. Dayu just shakes her head. The panic has already ravaged her body. And that brings us to this quiet, claustrophobic aftermath in her bedroom. Tanshin and Jang-yoon try to comfort her, but they do it in that slightly dismissive, toxic positivity way people sometimes treat anxiety.
Oh, definitely.
They tell her, hey, don't be sad. Just focus on getting better so we can all hang out and write poetry together again.
The classic just cheer up, it's fine approach. It's well-intentioned, of course, but ultimately profoundly alienating for the person who is actually trapped in the suffering. It completely minimizes the physical reality of what her body just went through.
It pushes her further into isolation. Dayu's response is just pure fatalism. She cries and says, you just want me to be happy, but I likely won't make it to those days. She genuinely believes she is dying.
Yeah.
And yet, even in this state, her primary concern is being a burden. She begs Tanshin not to tell her grandmother the truth about how sick she is, to just say she's slightly unwell so she doesn't cause worry.
And that is the ultimate tragedy of the guest mentality. Even when you're collapsing, your first priority is to minimize your own footprint. You cannot allow yourself to be an inconvenience, not even in your suffering. The psychological mask never comes off.
So her cousins leave, and Dayu is left alone in her bed. And this is where the text gives us an incredibly vivid description of sensory overload. Usually, the Grandview Garden is described as this serene, isolated paradise.
Very quiet.
But now, lying there, Dayu is agitated by absolutely everything. She can hear the wind, she hears the bugs chirping, the birds. Every single footstep is booming like a drum. She can even hear the distant, agonizing sound of children crying somewhere far away.
It's a complete cacophony.
A cacophony she cannot escape. She is so overwhelmed, she begs her maid, Ziwan, to drop the thick curtains around her bed, just to block out the world.
The environment hasn't changed, though. The garden is exactly as quiet as it always is. What has changed is her internal filter.
How so?
Well, when your nervous system is pushed into extreme overdrive by a panic attack, a specific part of your brain called the reticular activating system, which is the part responsible for gating sensory information, it essentially stops working properly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it stops distinguishing between a dangerous tiger and a harmless cricket. The gate is left wide open, and every tiny input registers as an immediate physical threat.
And we see that physical toll in the care ritual that follows. Her maids are treating her like spun glass. One maid brings a bowl of bird's nest soup, which is a massive luxury item, by the way.
Highlighting all the wealth surrounding her misery.
Exactly. Her primary maid takes it, gently supports Dayu's shoulders to help her sit up, and carefully feeds it to her. And after all that effort, Dayu manages to take maybe 2 or 3 tiny sips before she just shakes her head and refuses the rest.
She is physically incapable of taking nourishment.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Looking at these symptoms, the hypersensitivity to sound, the fatalism, the inability to eat, the fainting. Are we looking at a traditional physical illness, or is the text actually giving us a masterclass description of a severe anxiety and panic attack manifesting physically?
That is such a valid question, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, you are absolutely hitting on the core genius of this passage. We have to view this through the lens of somatic distress.
Right.
The aesthetics of illness in this culture often romanticize fragility, making it look beautiful or poetic. But the author strips all that away here. The text is demonstrating how deeply entwined the mind and the body are. Despite being surrounded by maids tending to her every physical need, she is utterly, profoundly isolated inside her own mind.
Because the noise isn't in the garden. The noise is in her head.
Exactly right. Her inability to filter out the sounds of the wind and the bugs is a direct physical representation of her inability to quiet her own anxious thoughts. She drops the bed curtains to block out the world, but the real threat is internal.
That isolation is so palpable. You can just picture her, hidden behind those curtains, feeling completely alone. But the narrative doesn't leave her there.
No, it doesn't.
While Dayu is suffering this acute pain in her room, the text reveals she is shockingly not the only one in agony. This brings us to the arrival of Shirin, and things get almost supernatural.
The focus shifts, and the world of the novel suddenly expands in a very unexpected way.
So Dayu is resting when they hear a voice outside.
Yeah.
It's Siren, a high-ranking maid from a totally different courtyard, the courtyard of Baoyu. And for context, Baoyu is Dayu's cousin and her deep, unspoken soulmate.
Right.
Shirin sneaks over to Dayu's room, and she is completely frazzled. She reveals that they heard a rumor Dayu was sick, and it terrified Bayu so much he sent Jiren to find out what was going on.
And it's important to note she sneaks over. Again, the pressure of the environment means everything must be handled delicately without starting rumors.
Absolutely. So Sharon is whispering with Dayu's maids, but she drops an absolute bombshell. She reveals that Bayu had a horrific, terrifying night. She says that in the middle of the night, while asleep, Bayu suddenly woke up screaming.
Just out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, he was clutching his chest, claiming he had a severe heartache. Sharon says he was crying out that his heart felt as if it was sliced by a knife. He was in absolute agony, talking nonsense, and didn't calm down until dawn.
The timeline here is the critical piece of information. His physical breakdown mirrors hers, happening at the exact same moment.
Wait, how is this possible? Is this a fantasy novel? Are we talking about literal magic here, or is this an allegory for extreme empathy? Because feeling a knife in your chest when someone across an estate faints seems wildly supernatural.
It's kind of both. It bridges the gap between the supernatural and the psychological. In the broader lore of the novel, Dayu and Bayu are reincarnated spirits, a magical flower, and a divine stone, so there is definitely a mystical element.
Okay, that makes sense.
However, psychologically, the author is exploring the concept of Jin, which roughly translates to knowing the tone. It's the idea of a soulmate whose internal frequency perfectly matches your own.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, the author is suggesting that when two people are that perfectly attuned, empathy ceases to be just an emotion and becomes a physical sensation. Bayu doesn't just feel sad for Dayu. His nervous system is so linked to hers that he physically registers her psychological trauma as a cardiac event.
He feels his heart being sliced by a knife because her liver and intestines feel torn apart.
What's fascinating here is the nature of their connection. He is literally physically feeling the psychic shockwave of her panic attack from across the estate.
And the way they handle this connection is just devastating. Dayu, who is lying sick behind her bed curtains, overhears this whispering. She coughs, calls Jiren over to her bed, and asks her point blank, "What happened to Bayu, who had a heartache in the middle of the night?"
She catches her.
She catches her. Now watch what Jiren does. Jiren looks at Dayu, sees how frail and sick she is, and immediately pivots. She downplays the entire terrifying night. She lies to Dayu's face and says, "Oh, it was nothing. Bayu was just having a nightmare. He got sleep paralysis. He's fine. It wasn't a real illness."
She lies to protect Dayu from worrying. In our modern context, we might view that as gaslighting or just being dismissive, but in the context of this hyper-pressurized aristocratic society, deception is often wielded as a form of deep compassion. Jiren is lying to protect Dayu's already shattered nervous system.
But Dayu is brilliant. She sees right through Jiren's lie immediately. She knows Bayu. She knows what that midnight panic really was. And the text says she feels this profound mix of immense gratitude that Jiren cares enough to lie to her, but also deep, deep sadness because she knows the truth of Bayu's pain.
She understands the emotional reality beneath the spoken lie. She knows he is suffering, and she knows exactly why he is suffering.
And then in this perfectly tragic mirror image, Dayu does the exact same thing. She sighs and she tells Jiren, "Listen to me. Do not tell Bayu how sick I am. If he knows I'm unwell, he'll worry, he'll miss school, and he will anger his father. Tell him I'm fine."
And we have to remember the cultural weight of filial piety here. Angering the patriarch of the family is a massive deal.
Huge deal. So Jiren agrees, goes all the way back to Bayu's courtyard, and tells him, "Dayu just feels slightly unwell. It's nothing major." And upon hearing that lie, Bayu's immense anxiety is finally relieved.
The symmetry of their suffering and their subsequent response to that suffering is just beautifully constructed. They are trapped in a feedback loop of pain and protective deception.
Meanwhile,
Lin Dayu.
yes, her situation is just heartbreaking.
Her physical breakdown is becoming impossible to ignore. She's coughing, she can't eat, she can't sleep. But the matriarch of the family, Jia Mother, is basically just annoyed by it.
Yeah, she just completely dismisses it.
She waves off Dayu's deteriorating condition, claiming that the young woman is just, quote, too detail-oriented.
It's a brutally dismissive way to phrase it.
It really is. It's basically saying she's overly sensitive or making herself sick by overthinking. And honestly, we see this exact dynamic all the time today, don't we?
Oh, absolutely.
Like mistaking systemic burnout or the physical toll of a toxic environment for a difficult personality or a personal failing.
It's the classic strategy of minimizing a systemic problem by localizing the blame onto the victim.
Right, making it her fault.
Exactly. If Dayu is just detail-oriented or overly delicate, then the matriarch doesn't have to look at the incredibly toxic, hyper-competitive, and emotionally repressive environment they've created for her.
It just totally absolves the institution of any responsibility.
Yes, it absolves them completely of her suffering.
So to deal with this quote-unquote delicate problem, they bring in Dr. Wang. And the contrast in how he treats the patients is so telling.
It's night and day.
He comes in, takes a quick look at another central character, the favored grandson Baiyu, who just has a minor cold, and he brushes it off.
He says it's nothing. The boy just needs to disperse the wind.
Right, disperse the wind, no big deal. But then he gets to Daiyu, and the physical examination itself is this incredibly intricate, almost theatrical dance.
It's so meticulous.
Her maid, Zihuan, has to carefully pull Daiyu's hand out from behind the heavy bed curtains. She rests the wrist on a specialized, tiny medical cushion,
And she gently rolls up the sleeves, adjusts her bracelets.
making absolutely sure that not a single piece of jewelry or fabric is pressing on the pulse to alter the reading.
You're seeing the physical boundaries and the social etiquette operating just as rigidly as the medical procedures.
Because he can't just examine her like a modern doctor would.
Right. In this era and social class, a male doctor cannot simply walk in and lay hands on an unmarried aristocratic woman. The pulse is literally the only bridge between his medical knowledge and her internal world.
So that pathway has to be perfectly cleared.
Meticulously cleared, yes.
And after all this delicate, high-stakes pulse-taking, Dr. Wang delivers his diagnosis. He states that her 6 pulses are stringy and sluggish,
Yes.
and the root cause he identifies, pent-up depression.
Which is a huge revelation.
He starts listing these highly specific symptoms out loud, almost like he's reading her diary. He says she must be experiencing dizziness, poor appetite, waking up multiple times right at dawn, being easily angered by unrelated things.
And suffering from paranoia and fear.
Yeah, and the maid is standing right there, just nodding, validating every single word.
What stands out to you in that moment? Because medically, what he's doing is profound.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, the doctor explicitly notes that outsiders who don't understand medicine might look at Daiyu and just think she is eccentric or cranky.
Which is exactly what the grandmother did.
Precisely. But he completely bypasses that moral judgment. He validates her emotional state as a very real, severe physiological breakdown. In traditional Chinese medicine, he diagnoses this as liver yin depletion and heart-quake exhaustion.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where my modern brain kind of short-circuits a bit.
I get that.
I have to push back a little on the framing here. Is this doctor actually diagnosing her physical body? Like, is her literal liver failing? Or is he just a really good therapist who is incredibly skilled at cold reading her life and her emotional state?
It's a fair question.
Because, if I go to the doctor today with severe insomnia, loss of appetite, and paranoia, and the doctor says, your liver is glitching, I'm going to be completely lost.
The confusion makes total sense because it sounds alien to Western medical ears. But you have to remove the hard line between the emotional and the physical.
Okay.
In traditional Chinese medicine, they aren't two separate systems interacting. They are the exact same system.
So they don't see the liver as just an organ.
Right. The liver isn't just a biological meat filter for toxins, the way we view it in Western biology. It is the energetic organ responsible for the smooth, unobstructed flow of emotions and qi throughout the body.
Oh, wow.
So when you suppress massive amounts of grief, resentment, and anger, which Daiyu has to do constantly just to survive the political minefield of this house, that energy stagnates.
So the emotion literally gets stuck.
Yes, and that stagnation physically hardens the pulse. When he says the pulse is stringy, he means it literally feels like a taut guitar string vibrating under the skin.
That is wild.
It's the physical manifestation of being constantly on edge, tightly wound, and unable to release the tension.
So it's like a modern doctor diagnosing a severe debilitating panic attack or chronic PTSD as a localized liver glitch.
Exactly.
It sounds strange, but the brilliance of it is that it completely validates the patient's mental struggles as a real physical illness. She isn't crazy.
No, her heart case is literally exhausted from running on a treadmill of anxiety.
Which removes the blame from her entirely.
That is the core of it. It grants a physiological reality to her psychological torment. But, of course, diagnosing the complex mechanics of the problem is only half the battle.
Right, because treating it requires what I can only describe as a bizarre mix of pharmacology and ancient military strategy.
It really is quite the combination.
We move from the diagnosis to the prescription. Dr. Wang prescribes a formula called Black Xiaoyao to clear the stagnation, followed by a medicine to strengthen the lungs.
Yes, a very specific regimen.
But before they can just brew this up, another character, Jia Lian, steps in. He's an aristocrat who apparently knows a little bit about medicine, and he openly questions the doctor's use of a specific herb called chaihu, or bupleurum.
And Jia Lian raises a very sophisticated medical concern here, which shows that medical knowledge wasn't solely the domain of doctors. Educated aristocrats studied it too.
What's his issue with the herb?
He knows that chaihu is an uplifting herb. Its specific function is to take energy and blood and push it upward and outward to break through stagnation.
Okay, so it pushes things up.
Right. But for a patient like Dayu, who is already extremely fragile and prone to coughing up blood, sending a sudden rush of blood into her chest and head could trigger a hemorrhage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it could be instantly fatal.
So he's essentially saying, you're prescribing a massive dose of physical stimulant to someone whose heart is already racing out of control.
Exactly. He calls the doctor out on it.
And Dr. Wang's solution to this problem is just wild. He agrees that chaihu pushes blood up, but he says they're going to neutralize that danger by frying the herb in turtle blood before administering it.
It is a striking, almost visceral image.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The doctor doesn't just say, "Trust me, I'm a doctor." He justifies this by quoting a foundational ancient medical text, the Neijing.
Yes, stating they are using obstruction to treat obstruction.
I need you to break that down for me, because then he compares this pharmacological trick to a famous historical military coup.
He does, yeah.
He says frying the herb in turtle blood is exactly like the political strategy of using Zubo to secure the Liu family. Why on earth is an ancient physician seamlessly blending military coup metaphors with how he prepares a botanical tincture?
To understand that, we really need to clarify the mechanics of what he's doing. When he says using obstruction to treat obstruction, he is identifying two different forces.
Okay.
The first obstruction is Dayu's illness, the stagnant, blocked emotional energy knotting up her liver. To break that, he absolutely needs the stimulating power of the chaihu herb.
And he can't let it rush to her head.
Right. So he introduces a second obstruction, the turtle blood. In this medical system, turtles are creatures of deep water. Their blood is heavy, cooling, and naturally sinks downwards.
Oh. So he's essentially using a Trojan horse.
A Trojan horse is a good analogy, but let's connect it directly to the military history the doctor references.
Please do.
In this worldview, the human body is quite literally a kingdom. The organs are the ministers, the heart is the emperor, and the energies flowing through the body are the citizens and the armies.
So her body is a literal battlefield.
Exactly. Dayu's liver has what they call evil fire. It is a province in open rebellion.
And you can't just send an army in indiscriminately or you burn down the whole kingdom.
Precisely. The historical reference he uses, Zhu Bo securing the Liu family, refers to a famous general who had to use profound deception and complex maneuvering to sneak into an army camp.
To seize control.
Yes, to seize control from a rebellious faction and protect the royal dynasty without sparking a full-blown civil war.
That is so clever.
Dr. Wang is saying he has to sneak his general, the stimulating herb, into the rebellious province of the liver using a heavy, sinking disguise, the turtle blood.
Tricking the body.
Yes, it tricks the body into absorbing the medicine and sending it down to the liver where it's needed, rather than letting it rush up to the lungs and cause a hemorrhage. He is actively waging a psychological and physiological war inside her circulatory system.
That is a staggering way to view medicine. It's treating the human body as a geopolitical conflict zone, requiring espionage and covert tactics just to deliver a dose of herbs.
It really is.
But as we move deeper into this excerpt, we realize that the geopolitical conflict isn't just a metaphor for Dayu's body. The entire aristocratic estate is fundamentally rotting from the inside out in the exact same way.
The text transitions beautifully from the microscopic reality of one sick girl to the macroscopic reality of the entire family.
From the body to the budget.
Exactly. We move straight from the doctor prescribing this incredibly complex, expensive medicine to the mundane, humiliating reality of trying to actually pay for it.
Right. We get this behind-the-scenes conversation between a servant, Zurui's wife, and the ultimate manager of the household finances, Wang Shifeng, who goes by Fengji.
And this scene reveals so much.
The servant explains that Dayu's maid, Ziwan, needs to borrow a couple of months' worth of pocket money. And here is the bizarre catch to this extreme wealth. The expensive medical consultations, the doctors, the rare herbs, those are covered by public funds.
Yeah, the estate's central budget handles the big, performative official expenses.
But Dayu doesn't have a single coin of actual cash on hand for daily needs, for the tiny comforts of being sick in bed.
And before we judge the absurdity of that, we have to look at how aristocratic allowances functioned.
Okay.
Aristocratic women in the society were not supposed to touch filthy lucre. Cash was considered beneath them. Their lives were entirely subsidized by the estate's credit.
Like having a massive corporate account.
Yes. You could order a massive theatrical banquet or summon the region's top physician and simply put it on the family tab. But you had zero liquidity. You had no actual physical money to tip a servant or buy a specific snack.
So you have unlimited credit for the grand performative aspects of life, but you can't buy a $2 pack of tissues.
Exactly. And Fengji, the manager, is trapped by this structure. She refuses to give an official advance on the monthly allowance.
Because it's a slippery slope.
Her reasoning is strictly bureaucratic. She says if she opens that door for one person, every single family member will demand an advance, and it will set a terrible precedent.
Right.
She explicitly brings up past screaming matches and vicious arguments in the household that happens strictly over the distribution of this allowance money.
Which sounds so stressful.
And then she makes a stunning admission to the servant. She says flat out, money going out is more than money coming in.
Which is the cardinal sin of this family. She is saying the quiet part out loud.
She really is.
But she doesn't just deny the request and leave Dayu with nothing. Instead, she secretly tells the servant to weigh out a few ounces of her own personal silver to give to the maid.
Out of her own pocket.
Yeah. And she specifically commands, don't tell anyone it's from me, and definitely don't call it an allowance advance. Why is the manager of a famously wealthy, supposedly untouchable estate paying out of pocket for a sick girl's basic needs?
Because the alternative is unthinkable.
It's like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company using their personal Venmo account to buy printer paper and coffee for the break room because the corporate credit card is entirely maxed out, but they are terrified to let the board of directors know the company is broke.
That is a perfect analogy. Not only is the corporate card maxed out, but in your analogy, Fengji's entire personal net worth and social identity are tied to the company's stock.
So if the company goes down, she goes down.
She is cannibalizing her own personal wealth to prop up a lie. If word gets out that the main budget of the mighty Jia family cannot cover a few ounces of silver for a sick girl, the panic within the household would be immediate.
Like a run on the bank.
Precisely. The servants would lose respect and stop obeying orders. Rival family members would use the weakness to pounce on her managerial position, and the internal structure of the house would collapse overnight.
She is paying hush money to maintain the illusion of her own authority.
The macro is perfectly mirroring the micro. Just as Dayu's internal organs are failing while she must maintain the outward appearance of a quiet, perfectly polite, aristocratic lady, the Jia family's financial organs are completely failing while they maintain the outward appearance of limitless wealth and power.
And what happens when the shareholders, which in this case is the general public, out on the streets of the city start talking about the company? Because the gap between the internal truth and the public perception is staggering.
This is where the text introduces the sheer danger of public relations. The family's mythology has essentially gone viral, and that is a terrifying thing in 18th century China.
The servant, Zhao Rui's wife, starts gossiping to Fengji about the wild rumors she's hearing in the tea shops and the alleys outside the estate walls.
The public's perception of the Jia family is that they are basically mythological gods of wealth.
The servant says people believe the family has literal rooms entirely filled to the ceiling with gold and silver.
Just absolute fantasy.
They believe that when the royal concubine, who is a family member, visited from the palace, she brought carts of unimaginable wealth. The public thinks that when the family drops tens of thousands of silver pieces as a donation at a temple, it's just a hair off a bull.
It's a total caricature of wealth. The public imagination has completely decoupled from the actual mathematical reality of the estate's ledgers.
They are out there talking about the family owning solid jade lions at their gates. They are gossiping about a solid gold quillin, a mythical creature ornament that was supposedly stolen.
Which, by the way, is based on a tiny grain of truth regarding a trinket belonging to another character.
Right. But the streets have blown it wildly out of proportion into this massive golden idol. And then the servant recites a street song that local children are singing.
A nursery rhyme.
Yeah. The lyrics go, Ning Mansion, Wrong mansion, gold and silver like dirt, eat endlessly, wear endlessly.
And then the servant abruptly stops speaking.
She chokes on the words. She physically stops reciting the nursery rhyme because she suddenly remembers the final line of that song, which translates roughly to, "Calculate, in the end, it's all empty."
Such a heavy realization.
She realizes she is singing a literal prophecy of doom right to the face of the one woman trying to hold the crumbling finances together.
It is a chilling moment. The servant accidentally speaks the subconscious, unspoken terror of the entire family. And Fengji's reaction is deeply revealing. She doesn't laugh it off as silly peasant gossip.
No, she says, "A person fears fame like a pig fears getting fat," which is a visceral, almost violent proverb. A fat pig gets slaughtered.
And we have to explain why she feels like a pig about to be slaughtered.
Please.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, in the geopolitical reality of Imperial China, immense wealth and fame make you a target. The emperor and rival political factions are always watching.
So you can't be too flashy.
Right, but if the public believes you have infinite wealth, you are completely immobilized. You cannot downsize. You cannot quietly sell off a summer property. You cannot let a single servant go or serve a cheaper cut of meat at a banquet.
Because the moment you show a single crack in the facade,
The moment you show weakness, your creditors will panic and call in their debts. But worse, your political enemies will sense blood in the water.
they'll pounce.
They will petition the emperor for an audit. Showing weakness doesn't just mean you lose face. It means your properties are confiscated, your titles are stripped, and your entire family is sent into exile. The stakes are literal survival, not just social embarrassment.
They are hostages to their own public relations. Their social and physical survival depends on violently maintaining the illusion of the very wealth that has already run dry. The scene shifts abruptly. This whole crisis doesn't start with a royal decree or like an official medical bulletin. It starts with a spark.
A simple rumor.
Yeah, a rumor. We are looking at the patriarchal heads of this massive household, specifically Jia Shi, who deduces that there is a medical crisis in the palace based on a very specific, quiet observation.
Right.
He simply hears that a top-tier imperial physician, accompanied by 2 government officials, was summoned into the inner palace. That is his only clue.
And he looks closely at the personnel involved. I mean, Jia Shi's logic is a perfect demonstration of how people in highly restricted societies learn to read the tea leaves.
Oh, totally.
He reasons that an entire medical team of that caliber isn't deployed for a mere palace maid or a low-ranking concubine. It has to be someone of extreme importance.
Right.
And for the Jia family, that points to exactly one person, the imperial consort, their relative.
It reminds me of people today tracking the private jet flight logs of a major tech CEO to figure out if they're about to step down, you know.
Yes, exactly.
They're scrutinizing the movements of doctors just to deduce the health of their own flesh and blood. But looking at these Menjis, Shi and the other patriarchs, they're the heads of a massive, incredibly wealthy household.
Right, they command hundreds of servants.
Yet they're just pacing around in the dark, sending a messenger to the imperial hospital to beg for scraps of information. It feels like they are suddenly hitting an invisible wall where their money and titles just stop working.
Well, that invisible wall is the defining feature of imperial power. This scenario exposes the absolute limits of patriarchal authority in this era.
How so?
Outside the palace walls, within their sprawling estate, these men rule their domain absolutely. They dictate the lives of everyone under their roof.
Right, they're the kings of their own castle.
Exactly. But the moment their gaze turns toward the inner palace, their authority completely evaporates. Proximity to the emperor actually strips even the most powerful men of their personal agency.
Wow.
The inner palace is a black box, and they simply do not have the clearance to open it, no matter how vast their wealth is.
So they are trapped in this agonizing limbo, and the weight is broken not by news of her health, but by the machinery of the state.
Yeah.
Because the reality of the imperial bureaucracy literally walks through their front door, overriding their family anxiety with cold, hard protocol. 2 eunuchs arrive at the estate at noon.
Right.
And the men, who were just pacing in a panic, suddenly have to perform. They have to go out to the second gate of their compound just to greet these messengers.
Which is incredibly formal.
Yeah, and before they can even ask, is our daughter dying, they have to formally pay their respects to the consort through the eunuchs.
It forces a massive cognitive shift. I mean, they have to suppress the terrified father and perform the role of the loyal subject.
It's nuts.
And then the eunuchs deliver the decree, which is a masterclass in bureaucratic control. It's hyper-specific. The emperor allows exactly 4 female relatives to visit the sickbed.
And each of those 4 women is permitted to bring exactly 1 maid.
Right, no exceptions.
And the timeline is just as rigid. They are given a highly specific 4-hour window in the morning to enter and another strict 4-hour window the very next afternoon to leave.
It's all incredibly calculated.
But the detail that really stops you in your tracks is the rule regarding the male relatives. The decree states that the men are strictly forbidden from entering the inner palace at all.
They're completely shut out.
Yeah, they are only allowed to stand outside the palace gate and submit their formal name cards. Wait, so her own father can't even physically see her when she's sick?
No, he cannot.
It feels intentionally cruel, as if the emperor is using this moment of vulnerability to remind them that she is state property first and their daughter second.
What's fascinating here is how the state dictates and monitors even the most basic human intimacy. Your theory about it being a reminder of ownership is spot on.
It's just so cold.
It is. This protocol serves as a stark, unavoidable boundary line. The bureaucracy completely sanitizes their family grief.
Yeah.
The state is effectively communicating. Your daughter's experiencing a medical emergency, but you will process your fear through our approved paperwork, strictly on our schedule.
Unbelievable.
And only the personnel we explicitly authorize will be allowed to witness her condition.
It transforms a deeply personal family trauma into like an exercise in middle management.
Exactly.
And this emotional whiplash from the emperor's decree is immediately overshadowed by a logistical nightmare. Because to actually comply with this incredibly strict time frame, the family has to move a small city overnight.
They really do.
The edict says they must arrive tomorrow morning. Grandmother Jia has to immediately step up and make executive decisions on who the 4 permitted women will be. She chooses herself, Lady Xing, Lady Wang, and Wang Shiming. And the source material explicitly notes that Xi Feng is chosen because she manages everything. Even visiting a sick relative requires deploying the family's top operational manager.
Well, a project manager is entirely necessary when you look at the sheer scale of what they're required to move. They aren't just calling a cab or hopping into a car.
No, definitely not.
Operating an aristocratic household of this magnitude is akin to managing a small municipality.
Let's paint the picture of what this actually looked like for a second. Imagine waking up an ancient, sprawling compound without electricity. It's pitch black. We're talking about the hours just before dawn.
Right, between 5 and 7 a.m.
Yeah. You have estate managers shouting orders across courtyards, maids frantically lighting hundreds of oil lamps so people can actually see, stable hands pulling massive wooden carriages out of storage.
It's a massive undertaking.
The text outlines 4 green palanquins and over 10 large carriages being prepped. Outriders are sent ahead on horseback just to clear the outer gates and coordinate the route. It sounds like organizing a presidential motorcade or a military deployment just so 4 women can go to a hospital.
It really does.
I look at this and wonder, shouldn't their immense wealth make this easier? Having hundreds of servants seems like it actually makes the process infinitely more stressful.
That points to the ultimate paradox of their privilege. They possess extreme wealth and seemingly endless human resources, yet they are completely bound by the rules that govern that wealth.
How so?
Well, they are trapped in rigid transport hierarchies. The protocols dictate exactly who is permitted to ride in a green palanquin, who is relegated to a carriage, who must ride a horse, and who is required to walk alongside.
So everyone has a specific assigned place.
Exactly. Every single physical movement has to perfectly align with their social status and the palace's strict schedules. They cannot simply travel, they have to travel correctly according to imperial law. The logistics of their wealth function as a massive anchor. They are forced to drag with them everywhere they go.
It sounds utterly exhausting before they even leave their driveway.
Oh, absolutely.
And after this massive, perfectly choreographed pre-dawn mobilization, they finally arrive at the palace. This physical transition from the public streets to the inner sanctum leads directly into the emotional climax of what we are examining today.
This is where the separation really hits.
Right. The arrival is highly segmented. The men are halted at the outer gate, full stop. They can go absolutely no further.
Yeah.
The women take their palanquins to the inner gate, and then even those must stop. The wealthy women of the Jia family are forced to walk the rest of the way, physically supported by their maids.
And the environment itself is weaponized to enforce their subservience. The source text describes the palace as brilliant, glowing with glazed tiles.
It sounds beautiful but intimidating.
That's exactly it. It paints a picture of overwhelming opulence that contrasts sharply with the frantic, dark mourning they just experienced.
It's architecture designed to intimidate. It's meant to make even the wealthiest aristocrats in the empire feel incredibly small and insignificant.
Right.
But then, amidst all this intimidating, glowing architecture, we get a surprising shift in tone. They finally reach the sickbed, and the consort actually waives the strict protocol inside the room.
Which is a huge deal.
Yeah, she sends a message that all ceremonies are excused, no formal bowing, no rigid rituals for the women. Instead, they have this incredibly normal, almost mundane check-in.
It's very jarring.
The consort asks about grandmother Gia's health, and the grandmother casually says she's still healthy. The consort notes that Shifeng's household management must be hard on her, and Shifeng gives this very relatable, weary answer about just getting by. It's just small talk.
It is small talk, but it serves a vital psychological function. That mundane chatter is a desperate attempt by these women to grasp at normalcy.
Yeah, right. To pretend they're just a normal family.
Exactly. To pretend for just a few minutes that they are a regular family sitting in a regular room. Because the illusion shatters almost immediately. The reality of their situation crashes back down on them the moment the outside world intrudes.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the intrusion is the climax of the visit. While the women are talking, a palace maid enters the room bringing the name cards.
Right.
When I first read name cards, my modern brain immediately pictured like a little white corporate business card.
Oh, sure.
But in this historical context, we are talking about large, formal, ceremonial documents, pieces of red paper with elegant calligraphy detailing the titles of her father and her brothers.
The very men who are currently standing outside the gates, legally forbidden to enter.
Yeah. And seeing these pieces of paper, the consort just breaks down. She bursts into tears, and she delivers this gut-punch quote. She says, "A family of fathers, daughters, brothers, we are worse off than a small commoner family who can be close to one another."
That physical object, the paper name card, is crucial to understanding her despair.
It really is.
The emperor has reduced her father and her brothers to administrative paperwork. It is a devastating moment of absolute clarity for her character.
Think about the heartbreaking irony of her statement. This Gia family literally holds the highest social status possible in their society, short of being the emperor himself.
Right.
They live their entire lives surrounded by servants, riding in green palanquins, completely insulated from the struggles of the working class. Yet the imperial consort, the very woman whose sacrifice elevated them to this untouchable status, is actively and openly envying the poorest commoners on the street.
Simply because a commoner is allowed to hold their father's hand when they are sick.
Exactly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the text, you are looking at the core tragedy of this entire narrative. Society dictates that the ultimate success for an aristocratic family is having a daughter chosen for the inner palace.
Right, it's the ultimate goal.
It's supposed to guarantee your family's immense wealth, your political safety, your lasting prestige. But the text is revealing that this societal peak is actually a profound personal catastrophe.
That's a great way to put it.
Those paper name cards brought in by the maid are a cold, bureaucratic substitute for the human beings she is forbidden to look at. She traded her bodily autonomy and her family for a royal title, and now the entire clan is paying the ongoing emotional price.
It really is a gilded cage, a glowing, glazed tile cage. But even in the midst of this profound grief, while she is literally weeping over these pieces of paper, the consort's mind pivots.
She doesn't just stay in that despair.
No, she doesn't just cry and mourn her situation. She pivots directly to the future of the family, which shows you just how inescapable the pressure of their status truly is.
Yes.
Amidst her tears, she asks about one person specifically, Bayu, the young male heir of the family. Grandmother Gia immediately steps in to reassure her.
Right, she gives a progress report.
Yeah, she says Bayu is studying hard, mostly because his father is being very strict, and that he is now successfully writing essays. The text notes that the consort is pleased by this news.
Which seems odd at first glance.
Yeah, I have to wonder, though, is she basically conducting a performance review from her sickbed? Of all the things to discuss while isolated and weeping, why is she checking on a teenager's homework?
Well, this raises an important question about the family's overarching survival strategy. Bayu represents the future of the entire clan.
Okay.
The consort is acutely, painfully aware of the immense sacrifice she has made. Her entire existence, living in this beautiful, isolated prison, entirely separated from the people she loves, is meant to secure the family's status for the present.
Right.
But that status is incredibly fragile. It only lasts as long as she is alive or as long as she maintains the emperor's favor. Therefore, the next generation has to step up to solidify their position.
So Bayu is their backup plan.
He's their only plan. Bayu must succeed academically. He has to pass the grueling imperial examinations and become a powerful government official in his own right to justify her suffering.
Oh, wow.
If he fails, her sacrifice was for nothing. She is checking out his essays because his academic success is the only acceptable return on her investment of a ruined life.
That is an incredibly heavy burden for both of them. It's not just a question of whether he is doing his homework. It's a desperate check to ensure her life's sacrifice is actually going to be worth something in the end.
Exactly.
And they don't even have time to sit with that immense pressure or to comfort each other properly because the clock is constantly ticking. The visit is strictly timed by that original morning edict.
They're right, the 4-hour window.
Suddenly, an imperial banquet is bestowed upon them in another hall. They are forced to stop weeping, go eat this highly formal meal, and then the women must leave before the mandated afternoon deadline.
They cannot be late.
They don't dare stay a single minute longer than allowed. They pack up, re-enter their palanquins, and head all the way back to the estate, only to arrive and immediately have to prepare to execute the exact same massive pre-dawn logistical nightmare the next 2 days in a row. It is an endless, exhausting loop of protocol.
The ticking clock emphasizes exactly how fleeting and conditional this comfort is. The state allows them a precisely measured, highly monitored dose of family connection, and then abruptly cuts it off.
Yeah.
It reinforces the reality that the consort is fundamentally state property, only on loan to her family for a few hours, under strict supervision. Okay, let's shift scenes.
First, the master of the house, a man named Supan, has been driven out by his wife, Xia Jingwei.
Driven completely out.
Right, so the husband is totally gone from the picture. That leaves the wife, Jingwei, sitting entirely alone in her quarters.
Which honestly is already a recipe for resentment. But she isn't entirely alone in the compound.
Right.
She's trapped in really close proximity with her former maid, Baokan. Now here is the crucial detail. Jingwei previously elevated this maid to the status of a concubine.
And to make the claustrophobia even worse, the other concubine in this incredibly messy web.
Shangling.
Yes, Shangling, who is also referred to as Queeling in the text. Well, she has completely fled the scene.
Yeah, she just couldn't take the toxicity anymore.
Exactly. So she escaped to live in the quarters of his sister-in-law, Bao Chai.
Right, so look at the board now. The master is gone.
Yep.
The secondary target of Jingwei's wrath, Shangling, has completely removed herself from the immediate firing line.
Smart move on her part.
Very smart. And that leaves the bitter wife, Jingwei, and her former maid, Baokan, essentially trapped together in an echo chamber of their own mutual hostility.
Wow.
It is a completely claustrophobic environment.
Okay, let's unpack this, because let's jump right into the inciting incident that lights this powder keg.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
It starts off sounding so mundane, right? Jingwei has been drinking alone. She is clearly sitting there stewing, feeling highly regretful about her life choices.
Just wallowing in it.
Yeah, wallowing. And out of nowhere, she decides she wants a hangover soup.
Naturally.
So she demands that Baokan make her the soup. And while she is issuing this order, Jingwei asks her where their husband went.
It sounds like a seemingly simple interaction, right?
Totally normal on the surface.
The wife giving a standard order to a concubine who, let's remember, used to be her own personal servant.
Right.
In the traditional hierarchy of this specific household, Baokan should simply nod, go to the kitchen, prepare the soup, and answer the question respectfully.
But that is absolutely not what happens.
Not at all.
Instead of obeying, Baokan just snaps right back at her. No hesitation.
She really just goes for
He
it.
says, how would I know? He didn't tell you. Why would he tell me?
It is a stunning moment of rebellion. I mean, the sheer audacity of that response tells you everything you need to know about how far the discipline in this house has degraded.
I am fascinated by this specific dynamic because it feels so universally human, even outside of this historical context.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about it. It is like giving your assistant a massive unearned promotion just to spite your manager. But then suddenly, that assistant realizes they have tenure, they have a fancy new title, and they realize they don't actually have to listen to you anymore.
They're untouchable now.
Exactly. Jingwei elevated Baochan to concubine status for her own strategic reasons, and now she realizes she has completely lost control of the monster she created.
That is exactly the dynamic at play. You cannot grant someone power and then expect them to act like they are still powerless.
Right. It just doesn't work that way.
And Jingwee's reaction to this insubordination is what really kicks off the psychological warfare. She doesn't just pull rank or demand obedience.
No, she gets super petty.
She immediately gets bitterly sarcastic. She starts complaining that Bao Chan now has protectors. And Jingwee uses this incredibly evocative phrase. She says that trying to discipline Bao Chan now is like catching lice on a tiger's head.
Catching lice on a tiger's head. What a vivid image.
Isn't it?
It implies that even trying to correct this girl is going to get Jingwee's arm bitten off. It's essentially saying the risk of confronting her is lethal.
Precisely. And notice what Jingwee is doing here. She is suddenly playing the victim.
Oh, 100%.
She says to Bao Shan, "You are still my maid, but the second I ask you a simple question, you throw a fit and speak in riddles."
Right.
And then Jingwee takes it to the most extreme melodramatic place possible. She sarcastically suggests that since Bao Chan is so powerful now, she should just go ahead and strangle Jingwee.
So dramatic.
Right, because then Jingwee argues Bao Chan or the other concubine can just easily take over as the official wife.
It is textbook Darvu behavior. You know, deny, attack, and reverse, victim and offender.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, you've probably dealt with someone exactly like this at work or in your personal life.
Everyone has.
The person who initiates the conflict makes a ridiculous demand, and then the second you push back even slightly, they immediately start crying that everyone is ganging up on them.
Yep.
She flips the script to make it sound like she is the one being actively oppressed by her former servant.
It's highly manipulative.
Yeah.
But here is why the situation escalates into chaos. Bao Chen does not back down.
Not even a little bit.
Right. In a functional hierarchy, the subordinate would eventually fold under that kind of emotional manipulation. But Bao Can matches Jingwee's aggressive victim-playing energy perfectly.
She gives it right back.
She does. Bao Can starts crying foul herself, loudly claiming that Jingwee is bullying the weak.
Wow.
She wails that Jingwee just wants to use them as punching bags. And Bao Can starts literally crying to the heavens, making a massive theatrical scene in the room.
She basically calls Jingwee's bluff. She says, "Oh, you want to play the victim. Watch me play it louder."
Exactly.
And that total refusal to submit just pushes Jingwee right over the edge into sheer, unadulterated physical violence.
Just snap something in her.
Jingwee scrambles off the bed and goes directly after Bao Can. She starts smashing cups, knocking over chairs, just actively destroying the furniture.
Total meltdown.
And Bao Can is just screaming at the top of her lungs about how wrong she is.
The sheer volume of this physical destruction is a pivotal turning point. Well, by screaming and smashing the furniture, Jingwee and Bao Can aren't just breaking porcelain, they're shattering the privacy of their own room.
Ah, I see.
This isn't a private, contained dispute anymore. The noise is so incredibly loud that it spills out into the rest of the family compound. It forces the rest of the household to get involved.
Right. Enter the peacemakers, or at least the people who are forced to try and be peacemakers.
Yeah, reluctant participants.
So the mother of the house, Aunt Shu, hears this absolute racket all the way from her daughter Bao Chai's room.
It's that loud.
Yeah. And Aunt Shu's first instinct is to send the other concubine, Zhangling, over there to break up the fight.
Which, if you understand the dynamics we laid out at the beginning, would have been a catastrophic mistake.
Exactly. And Bao Chai, the daughter, knows this instantly. Bao Chai is incredibly wise here. She stops her mother immediately.
A very good save.
For sure. She points out that sending Zhangling, the very person Jingwee despises and drove away back into that room, would be like pouring oil on fire.
Just a terrible idea.
So Aunt Shu decides she is to march over there herself to handle it, and Bao Chai ends up trailing right behind her to run interference.
Now, Aunt Shu is the matriarch. Her arrival at the door should theoretically bring an instant, terrified halt to the chaos.
Right. Everyone should freeze.
Her authority should be absolute.
But wait, I have to push back on Aunt Sue's priorities for a second, because this part genuinely confused me when I first read it.
Oh, how so?
Well, notice what Aunt Shu yells when she actually gets to the door. The room is literally being destroyed. Cups are shattering, chairs are being thrown.
It's a war zone.
But she doesn't ask if anyone is bleeding. She doesn't ask who threw the first punch or try to separate them.
No, she doesn't.
She yells through the door, asking if they aren't afraid the relatives will hear and laugh at them because of their low walls and shallow houses.
Right.
Why on earth is the matriarch more worried about bad PR than the flying furniture and potential physical injury?
It sounds incredibly callous to a modern ear, doesn't it?
extreme.
But what's fascinating here is the absolute paramount importance of maintaining face in this society. We tend to think of reputation as just vanity, getting likes on social media or having a good public image.
Yeah, just superficial stuff.
But in this historical structure, face is literal currency. It is your family's social credit score, their political leverage, and their economic safety net.
So you're saying it's not just about looking good, it's about structural survival.
Exactly. For Aunt Sue, the physical destruction of a few cups or even a few bruised arms is entirely irrelevant compared to the destruction of the family's reputation.
Wow.
The real crisis isn't the violence. It is the fact that the violence might be witnessed by outsiders. To have low walls and shallow houses is metaphor, meaning your private shame is easily broadcast to the public.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Order and reputation are the highest forms of security she has. If the community knows your household is entirely out of control, you lose your standing, your alliances, your protection.
Ah, okay. And Jinghui, who is highly manipulative, knows exactly what buttons to push.
She certainly does.
The second Aunt Shu brings up the rules and the reputation of the house, Jinghui weaponizes it against her.
She turns it right around.
She screams back from inside the destroyed room that she is the one who is afraid of people laughing. She claims the whole house is entirely backwards. She says the sweeping is done upside down.
A great insult.
Right. And then she delivers this devastating line to the matriarch. She says there is no master, no servant, no wife, no concubine. It's just a mixed-up world.
That is a direct, calculated strike at the very foundation of Aunt Shu's authority.
She is going for the throat.
Jinghui is essentially saying through the door, you are failing as a matriarch. There is no hierarchy here for me to respect because you haven't enforced one.
Ouch.
She explicitly claims that in her own family, the Xia family, she never saw such poor rules, and she argues that she is the one suffering by being married into this dysfunctional house.
So the matriarch's attempt to de-escalate using shame has completely failed.
Totally backfired.
That leaves Bao Chai, the daughter, and Bao Chai steps in to try and be the mature, rational diplomat.
Which is her usual role.
Yeah, she tries to soothe Jinghui with pure logic. Bao Chai explains, very calmly, that Andrew was just startled by the sudden noise, and all she really wants is for everyone to live peacefully and stop worrying their mother.
It's very reasonable.
It is a perfectly crafted, rational appeal to family unity.
It really is flawless diplomacy. Bao Chai is doing everything right according to the rules of conflict resolution, but it completely backfires.
Spectacularly. But why? Why does being perfectly reasonable make Jinghui even angrier?
Because Jinghui realizes in that exact moment that she cannot win a logical argument against Bao Chai's calm, measured demeanor.
Right, Bao Chai is making too much sense.
Exactly. Bao Chai is composed, respectful, and entirely in the right. If Jinghui engages with that logic, she has to admit she is acting like a lunatic.
And she's definitely not going to do that.
No. So instead of meeting logic with logic, Jinghui decides to change the rules of engagement. She goes straight for the jugular, shifting her attack away from the broken cups and directly onto Bao Chai's deepest, most painful personal vulnerabilities.
The gloves come off, and we move from broken cups to words as literal weapons.
The transition is brutal.
Jinghui's sarcasm here is just terrible.
Yeah.
She mockingly calls Bao Chai a great sage. She says, "Oh, you are so virtuous. You will surely get a good husband and a great family. And you won't end up a living widow like me with absolutely no one to rely on."
Living widow. That is a highly charged, incredibly painful phrase.
It's so harsh.
Jinghui is highlighting her own miserable abandonment by Zhu Pan, but she is using that pain as a weapon to curse Bao Chai's future.
Wow.
She is weaponizing her own trauma to inflict trauma on someone else.
And then Jinghui explicitly tells Bao Chai to mind her own business in the most insulting way possible.
Yeah.
She says, "You haven't been taught by parents how to handle the matters of men and women's bedrooms, so you have absolutely no right to speak here."
It is an incredible escalation. Jinghui is taking her own pain, her own marital failure, and trying to infect Bao Chai with it.
Misery loves company.
Exactly. And even though Bao Chai tries to defend herself, she calmly states that neither she nor Sangling have ever provoked Jinghui with a single cross word. Jinghui is completely beyond reason at this point.
She is literally throwing a tantrum on the edge of the bed, banging on the bed frame, crying uncontrollably.
Just completely losing it.
Jinghui starts comparing herself unfavorably to Jiangling, saying she doesn't know how to be flattering and serve up favors like Xingling does.
Right.
And then Jinghui delivers the ultimate jab, the climax of this entire verbal war. She screams out this devastating, sarcastic line. She says, "Not everyone has the destiny of an imperial concubine.
Yeah.
Go do some good deeds."
Oh, that reference to the imperial concubine is meant to be a crushing mockery of Bao Chai's high status and her personal aspirations.
It's just so pointed.
It is designed to humiliate her by throwing the highest possible social destiny right in her face, implying she's arrogant and delusional to act so above it all.
Okay, wait, I need you to explain this next part to me, because looking at how the other people in the room react to that insult is a wild study in contrasts.
It really is.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Aunt Sue, the mother, is so furious at hearing her daughter insulted this way that she completely loses her temper.
She snaps.
She literally stands up and offers her own neck. She tells Jingui, "If you are so upset, just strangle me."
The drama is off the charts.
But Bao Chai is totally innocent here. She just took the most vicious insult imaginable, and she does, nothing.
Nothing at all.
She just swallows her humiliation. She begs her mother not to get angry. She tells the concubine Bao Chan to shut her mouth, and then she physically leads her mother out of the room. Why doesn't she fight back?
Because Bao Chai understands the true cost of face.
Going back to that.
Yes, if she descends into a screaming match with Jingui, Jingui wins because the chaos spreads.
Nice.
Bao Chai uses stoicism as a shield. By absorbing the blow and not reacting, she denies Jingui the satisfaction of a reaction, and, more importantly, she contains the explosion.
She takes one for the team.
She really does.
Yeah.
She sacrifices her own pride in that moment to physically remove her mother from a highly toxic, escalating situation.
Wow. She absorbs all of that toxicity to keep the peace. But here's the crazy part. She now has to immediately step outside and pretend absolutely none of it happened.
This is the hardest part.
They step out of this feral screaming match, out of a room filled with broken furniture and malicious insults, and they walk out into the courtyard. And who do they bump into?
Out of all people.
A maid sent from Grandmother Jia.
And this raises an important question. How do you act normal when your nervous system is flooded with adrenaline, your heart is pounding, and you were just screaming about strangulation 20 seconds ago?
Apparently you talk about Langrius.
It's just bizarre.
I am not kidding. The contrast here is staggering.
Yeah.
Aunt Sue, whose face is still flush red with rage, immediately has to code switch.
She really flips a switch.
She asks the maid, "How is the old lady's health?" And the maid says, "Oh, she's perfectly fine. She sends her regards, thanks you for the lychees from the other day, and wants to congratulate Miss Kin."
It is a totally surreal exchange.
It's insane.
It is hyper-polite, completely disconnected from the reality of the violence that just occurred. They are discussing fruit and sending formal congratulations, while the family structure is literally imploding 10 feet away behind a thin door.
Aunt Sue knows the maid heard the screaming, right?
Mhm.
She blushes deeply and apologizes.
Yes, she's highly embarrassed.
She says the house is so messy right now, it doesn't even look like a proper household, and she is sorry they have to be laughed at. She brings it right back to that fear of the low walls.
And listen carefully to how the maid responds to that apology. The maid diplomatically deflects it.
Yeah.
She says, "What is the aunt talking about? Who doesn't have clashing pots and pans?"
Who doesn't have clashing pots and pans? That is the polite fiction of the century right there.
Exactly. It completely minimizes the toxic structural collapse of the family into a folksy, everyday annoyance.
Oh, everyone argues sometimes. It's just pots and pans.
Just normal family stuff, nothing to see here.
Right. The sheer psychological weight of maintaining this polite fiction for outsiders is staggering. Aunt Sue and Bao Chai have to stand there in the courtyard, smiling, nodding, playing the roles of the dignified matriarch and the dutiful daughter, entirely suppressing the severe trauma they just endured.
But you can't suppress that kind of stress forever.
No, it has to go somewhere.
The human body just isn't built to hold that much dissonance. As soon as the polite fiction ends, as soon as the maid leaves and the door closes, the biological bill comes due.
It always does.
And that brings us to the actual physical manifestation of all this emotional warfare.
Because the contrast between the feral interior of Jingui's room and the polite exterior of the courtyard requires a massive physiological toll.
Think about what is happening in Aunt Sue's body. Her fight-or-flight response has been triggered. Her cortisol is spiking. Her blood pressure is through the roof.
Yeah, she's in a state of high alert.
But society dictates she cannot fight and she cannot flee. She has to stand still and smile.
And we see the collapse immediately. The maid leaves. Aunt Shu walks back into her own room. She is just about to sit down. Maybe Bao Chai's trying to comfort her. And suddenly Aunt Shu cries out,
It hits her all at once.
It says, "My left ribs hurt terribly," and she collapses onto the bed.
Her body literally gives out. The facade breaks, the adrenaline crashes, and the matriarch falls.
It leaves Baochai and Shangling standing there panicking. They are completely helpless in the face of this sudden medical emergency.
It's a really terrifying moment.